when people say aging wrecks mitochondria, the better question is how much of this is age versus lifestyle?
Yep. And it comes down to like, do you stop exercising because you get old, or do you get old because you stop exercising?
Correct. Welcome to FuelIn Sessions. I'm your host, Scott Tindall, and today in this episode, I'm joined by Dr. David Lipman. You may recognize David's name because he is the host of the podcast, The Norwegian Method. He is a medical doctor. He's an advisor to tech startups. One in particular you may recognize is Super Sapiens. He is a wealth of knowledge. He is a member of a society of doctors that are involved in longevity research and study and interest. Today's episode is a cracker. We talk about a recent blog post that David did, which was looking at trends in 2026. Plenty of those trends interest me and certainly interest FuelIn because some of them we're bringing in. In particular, we talk about trends in wearables, and then we go deep dive into mitochondria. And it's a fascinating conversation about insights and recommendations that you can have with regards to mitochondria, what the best things are to make your mitochondria work as efficiently as possible, and maybe a few little tricks or potentially supplements that may help you get an edge. So sit back, grab a coffee, and enjoy this one.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
How's things?
Yeah, good, thank you. Bright and early here in London. Landed from New York 2 nights ago and on to Australia very soon. So that'll be a delta of roughly 60 degrees Celsius, which is right around 120 degrees Fahrenheit for those who work in Imperial. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah. Talk about some hormesis.
What were you doing in New York?
I was talking at a longevity doctors conference, actually. So yeah, not on supplements, but on wearables.
Very interesting. I imagine there was a lot of discussions at the longevity conference about the current goings on in longevity space, not necessarily because of longevity, but because of certain individuals involved in the longevity space that are currently wrapped up in a fair bit of controversy.
Not too much, actually. Well, maybe in conversations I wasn't involved in. That news broke while I was in the room. Like I got that news in the room, or I got a text about it. I don't know if anybody else was on their phone or if anybody else was getting the same news I was. But there's been I'm part of that Longevity Doctors has a big WhatsApp group of 500 docs, and there's been some discussion there about it and professional standards, those sort of things. Like I think the reality of anything is like we shouldn't make deities out of anybody, right? Like whoever it is, whoever you've chosen to look at and idolize, like we're all fallible humans, like, and so it's a fool's errand to make anybody a larger than humanity.
A demigod in some people's eyes.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I guess the longevity conference does segue very well into what we're going to talk about today, and Dave, actually probably very good of you. Do you want to just give a quick intro of who you are? I actually sometimes forget to get guests to do that, and I dive straight into the topic, and then I'm like, oh shit, they didn't actually introduce themselves. So do you want to do a quick intro, who you are?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I ask myself that often. So I guess I started out, I did an exercise physiology and a podiatry dual degree undergraduate in Australia. As part of my early days, I started coaching when I was 17 years old, like straight out of school, I was coaching. And so, I got really into the coaching, worked as a strength and conditioning coach through my undergrad, almost dropped out a few times to pursue it. Friends of mine who did so have ended up working at multiple Olympics, so we can debate who made better choices. Anyway, went on, finished my podiatry degree, worked as a podiatrist for a while. Towards the end of that, had decided to, having sworn off doing medicine my whole life, I thought actually maybe I want to do some medicine. So went on and studied medicine at that point. And through that, I'd been teaching at universities, both in exercise physiology and a little bit in medicine as well. Had lectured in podiatry, and part of what pushed me into medicine was the offer of doing a PhD in podiatry and staying on a staff. And I thought, actually, that isn't me. So went into medicine, did that, really struggled to, I guess, complete that from just like the people I was going through with. They were lovely people, but they were just not like me. And I didn't see there was a lot of, I was very healthy and wanted to prioritize lifestyle behaviors, exercise, these sort of things. And I was very much the odd one out, and that was kind of disappointing and tough for me to deal with, especially because we were in a little microcosm bubble of medicine. But finished that, started practicing, was actually enjoying it quite a bit, had the view towards moving to the US to do some functional medicine, and was in the process of doing that when I was traveling and met my now wife. And so she was living in Amsterdam at the time. She's an American. And I thought, okay, well, I can sit my US medical exams while I'm spending some time with her in Amsterdam, see how that goes. Went really well. Stayed there and thought, geez, I got to learn some Dutch here and meet some people. So I got back into coaching. And then because I couldn't work as a doctor, it was like slippery slope. And then I was running a rugby academy over there. I was coaching a junior national team. I was assistant coach to the men's national rugby league team. Had a bit of a Ted Lasso moment because I was coaching sort of top level union there as well. And had a Ted Lasso moment, was having nightmares and really struggling with like pressures of coaching. And my wife said, what are you doing? And then started working in a tech startup. And then now I work in tech startups and advise startups and do all that and spend some time between health and performance and do some podcasting. So,
I love it, mate. That tech startup, am I allowed to say which one it was? The initial one?
Happy to talk about it. Yeah.
So you used to work at Super Sapiens, and I think that's how we actually got connected.
Correct.
Through that. So, and through Eloise Doulard. And Eloise was part of the FuelIn team. She connected me with you, and the rest is history, as they say. And we've actually done a couple of seminars or talks together before, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think you're a wealth of knowledge. You're certainly a smarter individual than myself. So I thought what we'd do today is jump on something that I saw you wrote. You started a do you call it it's like a Substack newsletter?
Yep.
It's not Substack, is it? Is it?
Yeah, it is on Substack.
Yep. Substack. Yeah. So it's Nexus Health Performance, and we'll have the links in the show notes. But you wrote a good article at the start of the year, and it was trends for 2026, and it caught my eye. I subscribe to a lot of different newsletters, and most of them I actually just delete when they come in my inbox, and I sort of ask myself, why am I actually subscribing to this? But yours, I always glance at, always have a good read of. And so trends of 2026 caught my eye. You had a few, and we're not going to be able to cover all of them today. I think given I expect this podcast to do pretty well in terms of listens and downloads, so we'll probably get to majority of those trends early on in this year. But the first one was precision nutrition expands. And within that, you talked about this notion of personalized sort of, carbohydrate fueling and assessment, which Dr. Alan McCubbin and myself have actually covered one of those papers before, which was good. So we'll leave that one out. Weight loss drugs keep evolving.
Yep.
GLP-1s and things. I think probably a different time I want to talk about that because I think that's cool. Yeah. Wearables focus to shift to outcomes. I did like that. Do you want to we can touch on that one? Just give us your overview on what you think the trends for 2026 will be with regards to wearables.
Yeah. So at this point, wearables have kind of told us what's going on, right? They've said your glucose is X or your sleep was Y or your pace is this. But the evolution of that is so what? Like, so I know my whatever. So what do I do about that, right? And it's a problem. Like generally what happens with wearables is they go from what is this? So that's what is my glucose? What's it meant to be? What's normal? Or what is HRV? I don't even know what this is, right? So they have to solve that problem. That's a content problem. That's an education piece. And they can solve that in-app. It's what I was doing at Super Sapiens. It's pretty simple. Then is this good, right? Is my glucose good, or is my sleep good, or is my HRV good? And some of that's what we call user experience, UX problem and a solve. And that's why you have scores, right? A score is just a way of telling you, did you do good, bad, or bad, goodly, bad, well, badly, or indifferent, right? That's kind of the crux of it. And there's problems with scores, and I'm kind of allergic to them, but so be it, right? That's the reason for them being there, and I'm softening on that. It's not the hill I'll die on anymore. And then we get to a point of, so what do I do with it, right? And now if you look at two of the leaders in the space, Whoop and Aura, they both have this kind of AI type of coach that helps you, right? Whoop coach, Aura advisor, and they say, okay, here's some general advice, or here's some specific advice to you, or whatever, right? And that's kind of the evolution. But at the moment, we're not really affecting outcomes. And I think people are going to get sick of the data, right? Because we're sort of flooded with data to some degree. So then it's going to shift to outcomes. And generally people don't want to know they slept badly. They want to sleep better, right? That's kind of the thing. Or they don't want to know their glucose is bad. They want to know how to fix it, right? So we kind of end up with this like, so what do I do here? And so I think that's the shift we're going to see is these companies are going to start having to show outcomes or give outcomes to people. And I think we'll see that, right? So 8 Sleep is an example. It's not quite a wearable, but it improves your sleep, right? So it helps you stay more asleep, get better sleep, those sort of things. Like that's impactful, right? To an extent that
Mate,
just telling me it's bad is not.
Have you been reading our pitch deck on our Series A raise? Because
I have
it is
not.
literally exactly how we're describing what we're doing with FuelIn. And it's something that we picked up on. It's like, and this is the confusion, isn't it? Wearables, all these numbers, this data, everything. And it's like, well, what does it mean? And as you said, Whoop and Aura have started to do it. The biggest problem that they've got is they don't have insights into what someone's eating. Now, they've started to try and do it, but it's pretty awful. I'm not going to lie, and I can get hung out to dry for probably saying that. But the reality is what we're doing, because we've got all that nutrition data and the nutrition data and the timing of that in relation to the specific exercise they're doing in terms of intensity, duration, and time of day, it's completely different. So bringing in that FuelIn coach, which will give you also, and we can pull in the data from the wearables because of the API. So we can pull in heart rate, sleep hours, HRV, all that, which is great. Like it's numbers, it's noise. But if we then have that FuelIn coach, which actually looks at what you're eating, when you're eating it, the amounts, the quality, not just the quantity, overlapped with what you're doing with exercise and how you performed in that exercise and how you performed in sleep. Now we can look at insights into what you're doing, and then specifically, and I think this is the really big part and the cool part that we're bringing in, is the recommendations. Because I'm so sick of like seeing this stuff and it's like, yeah, you slept badly. And you're like, great. Tell me something I didn't know. Like, how can I fix it?
Exactly. Like what a the cool evolution of FuelIn would be, as a result of your poor sleep last night, we recommend extra caffeine today, extra creatine, and maybe, going, because you've got low intensity today, let's hold off on some carbs because there'll be a level of insulin resistance, right? Now, if you've got high intensity, we can't avoid the carbs. Like I don't subscribe to that.
Just take them in and do your bet. Like probably take in some extra carbs because you're feeling so ordinary. But like insights like that. And, let's look at your trends over time, not just the acute in the 24 hours. Let's look at what you did over the week. You know what? Per 1,000 calories, you should be eating around 14 grams of fiber. Do you know how much fiber you ate on a daily basis based on you actually were taking in an average of 10 grams of fiber per day. We also noticed that you're struggling with your body composition goals. Maybe let's increase, your serves of, and again, it's something we already do, but you make it actually based on the data that we're getting. Because you're not eating much fiber, we have this feature called Smart Meals, which gives you 3 choices of meals. Every smart meal that is a choice now is going to have extra vegetables in it with extra fiber to try and get you to at least 30 grams of fiber over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I can follow a recipe because now it's telling me to eat something specifically within that recipe to actually change an outcome. You're iron deficient based on the blood tests, which we're bringing in. Okay. You can talk supplementation, okay, depending, and obviously we're not going to be providing medical advice, but we're also going to be recommending at least 2 or 3 times a week iron-containing foods. And you're not going to, there's nothing worse. Okay, eat iron-containing foods. You're like, yeah, great. What? Well, actually, within 3 of the smart meals per week, of those 3 options, 3 days a week will be meals that actually have a set amount of iron in them, to allow you to go, you know what, actually I fancy meal B, and I know that it's going to be giving me the iron I need to try and change my ferritin levels to improve my endurance.
Yeah.
That's the next level.
Yeah, it's funny, so we published a paper a little while ago on the back of the Super Sapiens team, and it was talking about the risk of rebound hypoglycemia pre-exercise event. And it was just a big data approach. We had people who made events and they said, I ate and I exercised here. And then we just looked at the risk of developing rebound hypoglycemia. And one of the comments we got from the reviewers was like, you didn't track what these people ate. And I remember thinking, that's the point, because people don't eat carbohydrates. They don't eat protein. They eat meals. And it doesn't really matter what was in that meal, like the risk changed. Right now, of course, there's ways to mitigate the risk, right? But at the same time, if you're eating pre-exercise meal, you're probably focusing on carbohydrates. You're probably not doing a ton of fiber, and you're probably not going to do a ton of protein and fat. So any strategies we have outside of changing where you eat that are probably limited by the fact that you don't want to eat those things pre-exercise. So I just remember thinking these people, I get the feedback and they're correct, but at the same time, they're wrong. And because people don't eat a block of whatever, they eat a meal, right? So, and you need to solve for that.
Most of the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen,
sometimes they'll just suck back on a gel, or they'll suck back on 80 grams of maltodextrin or something in between. But yeah, majority of the time they're eating a whole food meal.
Awesome coconut oil, in the other camp. So
yeah, depending on what camp you're in. So yeah, mate, I love that insight, and I think, look, we're very excited about your insight and sort of your Nostradamus moment, because we were like, bingo, let's hope people are reading that, and actually let's see what we can do with this, because I think it is really the evolution of data, whether it's wearables or tech in general. It's got to be like, okay, what do I do now and actually help me do it, not just give me generic advice. So yeah, I love that one.
You also touched on firstly the fiber. You touched on the fiber, which I talked about as well. I think fiber is going to have a moment this year.
You did talk about fiber in that as well, and that resonated. I was like, we're going to bring in tracking fiber into FuelIn, because I've been reading about it probably the last, let's call it 12 to 18 months. Sports Medicine did a review on that was the basis athletes. Of it. Yeah, doing athletes and their lack of fiber intake. And it's this fear mongering around fiber. It's like, oh, fiber's bad for you if you're an endurance athlete. It's like, based on what? Like, if you're eating it like relatively short period of time before a very long, hard session, or a race. But other than that, get your head out of the sand. I'm not even convinced.
When I was in medical school, I was eating a very low meat diet, and I was eating a ton of vegetables. I was eating low carb, low meat. So it was basically vegetables and nuts and those sort of things. And I was routinely eating over a kilo of Brussels sprouts a week, right? Over a kilo. And I would be running on that. No, I never thought about like, oh, tomorrow I have a run and whatever. You can adapt to most things. Now, I'm not suggesting people eat a ton of fiber and go for a run. What I'm saying is I'm less convinced that you have to be deathly afraid of your normal amount of fiber. Now, if you want a carb load, you're going to have to reduce fiber to get the volume in. And if you're really worried and you've had GI problems before, sure, drop some fiber. But this view that you can never have fiber prior to like any endurance, it doesn't sit right with me at all.
Well, I mean, you listen, if anyone, listens to this show, has listened to myself with Megan Foley or Dr. Alan McCubbin, will say exactly the same thing. I mean, consuming fiber immediately before a session in a way is a form of gut training.
Yep.
Like it's something that you can do. And I still have this hypothesis and that, if you think about fiber, and everyone talks about gut health, and, we talk about longevity and all that stuff, but everyone talks about longevity, and then you talk about the gut health and the relationship between the gut and the brain. And it's like, well, what improves gut health? Fiber. Soluble, insoluble fiber. That is what feeds your gut bacteria. That's what ends up making short-chain fatty acids that fuels the rest of the cellular function of the body. And it's like, if you've got gut issues and then you look at what you eat and you work out that actually you don't consume any fiber or very minimal amounts of fiber on a daily basis, and you've got gut issues, you chronically get diarrhea and things like that, runner's gut, do you know what I'd do? I'd probably try and eat a lot more fiber and see if that actually has a positive effect. And the hypothesis I've got is if you can improve the bacterial species, the populations, plus the numbers of that, I have no doubt that will absolutely improve gut health for that individual athlete, even though it goes against this notion of fiber is bad for you in relation to exercise.
Yeah, so I agree. It's something I've been focusing on is like fiber and getting more and more and more in. So I think it's going to replace protein in the lexicon for the thing people are getting towards. So that'll be interesting.
We've gone through high fat, and then it's sort of been like the high carb movement. Then we've had the high protein movement. I mean, now, we'll go high fiber. And just as a caveat to this, when you do start to increase fiber, don't go from 5 or 10 grams up to 30 or 40 grams of fiber, because that inherently will block you up. and give you probably a fair bit of distension in the abdomen from gas production, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a natural process, but too much fiber too quickly, if unaccustomed to it, can be quite unpleasant. So, like everything, stage.
I was going to say it's like running volume. It's like whatever in the it just
carbohydrate intake,
whatever baby steps. Baby steps, ease into it. Like big changes are almost always a problem for physiology in anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I love the fiber one. That tied in really nicely with the focused and shift of outcomes for wearables. Everyone will become an athlete. I love this one as well because this really plays into our narrative, because we're like, well, anyone who sweats is an athlete. And I think in your case, like, just explain what you meant with everyone will become an athlete.
Well, I think historically we've looked at athletes and fetishized some of the things they've done. Their focus on wellness and these sort of things, right? Sleep and recovery and all those things. And then we've seen that as distinct from performance in, say, a boardroom or with our family, right? And we've gone like, I don't need to sleep because I'm grinding here in a startup or whatever. And, that sort of unhealthy pursuit, thinking it will be fine because I'm not an athlete. But the reality is the physiology is pretty similar. Like if you want to perform well, you have to sleep properly, you have to eat properly, you have to look after yourself, right? Whatever that is, you can't drink excessively. And so I just think there's going to be a shift, partially because we fetishize athletes, right? So the athletes fetishize the military fetishize the boardroom, and the boardroom fetishize the athletes. It's kind of this weird like triangle. And we all look at the other one and go like, oh, look, it's amazing what they do, right? From a leadership standpoint or from whatever. And it's like, you should all be doing all of it. Like you're all more similar than you think. And so there's a big shift towards it. And you see this, right? So I mentioned, the definition of an athlete at Super Sapiens for a while was anyone with a goal, right? And I think that's a really broad experience. Anyone who sweats is an athlete is another good example. But, you see this, you see the expansion of Whoop. Like Whoop's gone from very much like niched into CrossFit and relatively serious athletes down to a more wellness play, both from a branding perspective, who they're working with, and then certainly the form factor. You see, similarly, there's, everyone's got this project. So Matthew Marquardt, who listeners might be familiar with, professional triathlete, medical student, he's running a big study on, using wearables, quantifying surgery, called the Surgeon Athlete Project, right? Like we're just seeing this everywhere as everyone's starting to think about themselves more like an athlete. And I think it's good because they're going to prioritize all these important things that, athletes don't negotiate about. They don't negotiate about their diet. They don't negotiate about sleep. They don't negotiate about recovery. And, having worked in surgeries and with surgeons and watched them, run to the car for a cigarette between cases or, skip sleep for whatever reason, like you're going to start seeing performance improved if you eat properly and sleep properly and do all those things.
Yeah, it's two points there that you made, actually. Well, the first one being is you talked about the distinction between like executives and athletes and that, and actually there's not that distinction. And like people, there is that distinction, but there's really not, because I think of like a lot of my premium clients that I work with, well, funnily enough, they're executives, very high performing CEOs who have a mindset of an athlete. And so they do blend, and you look at their output, not just from an athletic perspective, but from a professional perspective. And you're like, well, yeah, they're an athlete. They're an athlete in the boardroom and they're an athlete on the field or out on the road. So I love that. And then your other point, you're talking about the surgery. Well, what's really cool, and this is something like I've talked about on some other episodes, is that with the University of Maryland's and the hospital group in the Maryland's, we're actually looking at exactly the same thing. We're treating fracture clinic, so lower limb fracture clinic patients as athletes. And we're actually applying. So they did the first part, and it's just gone through to ethics. They looked at gastric emptying of Morton and precision hydration to look at gastric clearance and the rate at which they went through. I'm not going to divulge what the results were yet, but it's fascinating.
You're going to have to share that with me. I'm very interested.
It's so cool, because what we're doing, it was all on the basis of Jan and me having a chat about carb loading before orthopedic surgery. And they were like, it caught the ear of one of the guys in charge. And he was like, well, I think we can do this. So now they're about to do the third part of the study and recruit. And yeah, effectively lower limb fractures, they're going to apply carb load using Morton or Precision as the carb load products. The the athletes, the patients, the fracture clinics get their little goodie bag of athletic performance goods to help them carb load. We talk about minimizing fiber. I mean, it's just pure sugar effectively that they're using. And then they're monitoring the gastric contents to ensure they're safe. And then they go to surgery, and then we're going to look at outcomes like improved hospital time or rehab time, everything like that. So it's another way in which we're saying, well, okay, you might have fractured your hip, but you're actually going to be, treated like an athlete, and what an athlete does before they go and do an 8-hour or a 10-hour race. You're the same. And I love it.
Except an athlete gets to eat during their race. Right,
Well,
and these
true.
people don't.
But,
No, I'm serious. Like it's even more important.
The other way,
in the surgery that you don't get to eat, right? And so they need the sports nutrition because the anesthetists are worried about gastric contents. So it's fascinating because the other part of me is like they should actually have a bit of fiber because not in the acute phase, but in a more sort of subacute phase because going to the toilet's such a problem when you're post fracture and you've got opiates on board and all those things, right? So if you haven't opened your bowels, you don't leave the hospital. That's one of the rules. So helping them with that. And, hospital food's not great from a fiber content perspective. So
one of the things is compliance is also, and we're using FuelIn with this, and we'll be able to track, they can track like, did they consume, because it's easy to track things like Morton and Precision. When they eat it, they can hit consumed. So then we have a log of what they were actually eating in relation, their target of carbs before surgery, and then the post-operative period. Hopefully we can structure post-operatively, maybe improving. Probably the second phase will be like things like post-operative care. Can they get optimum amounts of protein, carbs, and fat and calories to actually optimize? I know you're shaking.
No chance.
Maybe in a private hospital. But,
I used to joke. I used to joke with the dietitians. I was like, anybody you've not put on extra protein today? And and all of them would say no. And I'm like, shouldn't that then be the baseline? If you go to every patient and say high protein, high energy, shouldn't that just be baseline? Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, it's going to be fascinating. But yeah, look, everyone's an athlete. Look, we're so they're sort of the things that we weren't going to cover in depth, but that's good because we're about halfway through the episode. So the thing that really caught my attention, and you can shame me if you want, but listening to a longevity individual, Mr. Huberman, I did catch an episode that he put out, which was about mitochondrial function. And I did listen to it, and unfortunately it lost me when the guy started saying that RCTs have no relevance in nutrition. And I was like, okay, you just lost me with all credibility and everything like that. But it was an interesting topic, 3.5 hours of my life that I spent on a trainer listening to. And, was it a waste of time? No, I did probably think it got me thinking about mitochondria in a different way, in that they're not just single organisms, and they're not all the same. Depending on their location in the body actually means that they will do different functions. And I hadn't quite an not abstract, but just a different way of thinking about it. I hadn't necessarily thought about mitochondrial. They're mitochondria as a group, but mitochondrials?
No, I think it's singular. I think
or the other
mitochondrium, perhaps.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he was talking about it and how to think about them in like cardiac versus skeletal muscle versus brain. And I was like, okay, I did get something out of that. But you made some claims around mitochondriacs assemble, which I enjoyed. Do you want to just give me your take on your view on the trend in 2026 with regards to mitochondria?
Yeah, I think the conversation is going to expand. You actually reached out to me about this and you said, did you listen to that human episode? I said, I hadn't listened to it, but it's a good example of this is where it's going. I picked the trend, and, the fact that it's on Huberman, the fact that it's elsewhere is proving me right, so to speak. It's just something like, I spend time in the longevity space, more as sort of an avid interest. I talk about it a little bit. I'm interested and I'm across it, right? I'm more of a generalist than a specialist. But when I speak to these longevity doctors, their obsession around mitochondria is like unbelievable,
insane.
So and I think it's warranted to some degree, certainly from what we're starting to understand about how the mitochondria function and their specialized roles. Like you talked about different specialization within different organs, but I think there's probably, and certainly this rings a bell in the back of my head. I don't know if it's something I've read or a theory or something like that. So maybe fact check me on this. The internet, is undefeated. So feel free to fact check me, but certainly different roles within the same, say, organelle or organ. So like, mitochondria in one part of the muscle will be slightly different to another part of the muscle with different roles. And so, mitochondria are an interesting thing. We ingested a bacteria many, millennia ago as part of our evolution. And our mitochondria comes from our mother, right? So your mitochondria is from your mother, not your father. And
I did learn that from the podcast as well. So there's another good takeaway. I was like, so your endurance capacity potentially is from the maternal side as opposed to the paternal side. So marry well, man.
Yeah, well, and athletes seem to have more daughters, so it's quite an interesting sort of thing to think about that. But anyway, I digress. So you kind of have these mitochondria, you get them from your mum. They used to be bacteria, now they're symbiotic with us, or that it was symbiotic always, and now they're sort of part of us. They create, what we learn in high school biology, the powerhouses of the cell, they create energy, but they do all sorts of other things as well. They fuse, they divide, and it's quite an interesting thing in terms of how they behave and how we can improve them, right? Because everyone wants to improve them for both metabolic health, because they ultimately are a big part of metabolic health. And when we talk about metabolic flexibility, it's ultimately about mitochondrial health, right? Like your ability to burn different fuel sources is a function of mitochondria. And then similarly, or expanding on that, endurance capacity is based on that. And aging seems to be about mitochondrial function, at least to a degree, if not significantly so. So all of this points me to, and now we're going to start caring. And then we also have interventions, right? And those interventions we've had historically have been hard to measure. And, mitochondrial function is very difficult to measure. It's generally, if you look at research, they measure mitochondrial proteins, which gives an idea of mass of mitochondria, not number and not function, which is quite hard. Or they'll measure an enzyme, and that's maybe to do with function, but it's quite hard to quantify these things. But historically, we've kind of, the only intervention we've had is exercise, and telling people they need to exercise is kind of, it's a little bit of a boy who cried wolf these days. It's like, it's really hard to sell that message. They're like, I know I need to do it, I'm just not going to. Everyone wants to be healthier, but no one wants to change. So minimal intervention is helpful. And I think we're starting to see some minimal intervention strategies that will help people care more about mitochondria. So we talked about some supplementation, or we emailed about it and we talked about some red light potentially as well. And I think the fact that those two things are now available and people don't have to do much for them, I think is going to be a big driver in people's obsession with mitochondria.
Yeah, let's, and I love everything you've said there, and we're going to definitely cover everything you talked about. I think, and I love the fact that it's like, exercise and, what we know, and this is the thing that probably grates me the most, and probably grates you as well, is like people always look past the thing that makes the biggest difference. And if we look at this paper, and there's one paper in particular, again, we'll put the notes in. It's the title of the paper, and it was in Sports Medicine, and Good Australian was part of this authorship, John Hawley. Mitochondria as nutritional targets to maintain muscle health and physical function during aging, published July 2024. I like this paper, and you sent me this paper, and I was like, oh, I like this one. This is good. But it was like, something like when people say aging wrecks mitochondria, the better question is how much of this is age versus lifestyle.
Yep. And it comes down to like, do you stop exercising because you get old, or do you get old because you stop exercising?
Correct. And so I really like that. Like, and it's a review paper. Just let's keep that in mind, people. It's a review paper, because we've seen recently review papers dealing with carbohydrates make some pretty wild claims, and none of it was, particularly true. But anyway, that's another topic. We can cover that review paper at another time. This review repeatedly points towards fitness and activity as the major co-founder when comparing young versus old mitochondria. And I think, like, I really want to harp on that if people, and these longevity doctors and this space of longevity, like, people do the hard work. Do you know what? You do hard things, you get great results. And the hard work in this case is exercise, and exercise is what's going to change your mitochondria first and foremost. And your point, Dave, do you get old? Do you get old because, what did you say?
Do you stop exercising because you get old, or do you get old because you stop exercising?
I love that. We should put that on a shirt. That is great.
I mean, if you look at, I don't know if you know who Derek Clayton is, but he's an Australian. He ran 2:08 and held the world record in the marathon in like the 70s. Yeah, so, wow. Really impressive runner, and was doing north of 200 kilometers a week of running. Ended up stopping running because he had some injuries, started cycling, cycled at an elite level. But there's this great paper out of, I think it's University of Victoria or University of Melbourne, where they looked at they tested him over time. They tested him when he was elite and then in his 40s and anyway, into his 70s. And his VO2 max at 70 was better than most people in their 20s. And so it says to me a lot of this, we invoked one of the longevity docs before, and he has a sort of theory of like, you need to have a certain VO2 max at whatever age to maintain it. And I don't necessarily agree. So I think your VO2 max will be as high as it gets. And a lot of that's genetic, right? Or your muscle mass will be as high as it gets, or your strength will be as high as it gets. And there's a genetic component to that. It's not to say don't train it, but it's to say it will only get so high. And if we think about all humans on a normal curve, it's really easy to get to average, and it's really hard to get above average. And as you go higher and higher and higher, it gets harder and harder and harder to get those last couple of percentages. And that's within a species, but also certainly within your individual as a thing. So the highest my VO2 max will get is going to take me a lot of work. To get to 90% of that is not going to take me anywhere near as much work, right? It's an asymptote. It really flattens out towards the top. But if we think about that, it should be as high as possible, but maintaining any adaptation is a lot easier than gaining it. And so the key is not so much about the decay rate that's probably coming for you and assuming a certain decay rate, as much as, yes, it needs to be high, but yes, you've got to keep moving. And to maintain a good amount of functions, not that hard. So the key is to keep moving, right, is kind of the thing. And that's, all sorts of movement. That's variety of movement. That's endurance. That's strength. That's all of it. But you've got to keep it up, particularly, your listeners are almost all endurance athletes. But I would say, like, don't be so scared of the weights. They're not going to make you big. And, certainly the power stuff. So, I think it's really, really important to keep that stuff up.
And look, there's the insight. Let's go back to what we talked about, the wearables. There's the insight, people. The funny thing is, everyone starts talking about longevity when they're like in their 50s and they're like, everyone starts to think about, I got to think about old age. Guys, 20s, 30s, 40s. It's much easier to get your fitness up then. And then, as Dave said, just maintain it throughout your 40s, 50s, 60s. Yes, there'll be some decline, but it won't be huge if you keep exercising and moving. But don't wait until the last minute to try when you're already maybe a bit more overweight, a little bit weaker because you've lost some muscle mass because you've sat on your bum for the last 30 years. You've got no lung capacity because you haven't actually sprinted since you were 25. There is an opportunity throughout your lifespan to improve your health span. And that's, I think, again, what really grates me with this whole longevity talk is like, let's target everything earlier, people. Stop thinking about it like here and now. It's a process. And it's a long process of embracing health, embracing healthy habits, including nutrition, exercise, and sleep, that ultimately will drive longevity.
Yeah, I think, there's a statement, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. So certainly that, what I would say though is don't feel bad if you haven't started. When I was in medical school,
for sure.
My father,
I don't mean to say it in that way.
Yeah.
You can start any time. It's just probably easier if you started, as you said, 20 years ago.
My father was in his 60s when I was in medical school, and he asked me to run him a program, and I wrote him a program, and I came home from one holidays and we went to the park to do some calisthenics. And this is a bloke who, hadn't done any strength training for years and years. And all of a sudden he was doing reps of 15 chin-ups. And I looked over and I said, how did you do this? He said, I just did the program you sent me. So in his 60s, he went from basically 0 chin-ups to sets of 15, which, is pretty impressive at baseline at 15 chin-ups. There's not many people in society who can do that. So the point is you can certainly gain all these things in your older age, right? And again, going from below average to average is a lot easier than anything else. So I wouldn't be too worried about that stuff if you haven't started. But to your point, and I think one of the challenges is when you talk to a 20-year-old about longevity, they've got no context. They're not worried about, you feel like you're bulletproof.
And it's true, because when you are 20, you are bulletproof. Yeah, you're like, whatever, I don't need to worry about those old guys.
Exactly.
Now we're one of those old guys. We're like, shit, I wish I did more in my 20s.
Exactly, right? So there's certainly, to be old and wise, you have to have been young and stupid. So it's one of those things that it's hard to get that across to people when they're younger. But, I think your point around habits is really important, is like, let's form habits. And if you're a parent, I would say, let's be role models, because kids absolutely do not listen to you. They might when they're young, but they stop. And then they watch you, right? And, swearing's the best example. If you tell them not to swear and you swear in front of them, I guarantee you they'll swear. So I think being a good role model from a skills perspective, demonstrate, activity, show them that you exercise and exercise with them, and then show them that you cook and teach them to cook with you. Those sort of things I think are really important, because that's going to make the impact later down the road, because the habits will be there already.
Yeah, do as I do, not necessarily as I say. And if they experience it and see you experiencing, often that's more inspirational and aspirational than being told to do so. So, yeah, I 100% can get. The funny thing you mentioned about your dad, I did a similar thing, and he's like, right, what do I need to do? And he was about, I think he might have been 70 at the time. And I said, right, Dad, you're going to increase your protein intake. We're going to put you on creatine. We're going to do that. You're going to start lifting weights. And I remember we live in a small country town called Holbrook, and I took him down. We're in the gym. He goes, you want to go to the gym? I said, yeah. We did chin-ups. And at that time, he was like 70 something. And he was just repping out like sets of 10 on the chin-up. And I heard one of the people go, oh my God, like, that guy's going to kill that old man. I was like, no, I think he's fine. Like, he's literally doing reps of 10. And I was like, no, it's pretty cool. So, and it's the point you made there as well, that the ability, novice, anyone who is a novice lifter or trainer or anything will see rapid improvement, which is really cool as well, isn't it? Like you see those changes, and you see that improvement in muscle coordination, neuromuscular coordination, and you see these rapid gains in, I put in inverted commas, strength or power, which isn't true strength or power, but definitely improvements in the performance. And that's very inspiring to anyone who achieves that in the early stages, and hopefully gives them the kick on as well.
Yeah, it's one of the few things. I think the gym, and to some degree running and maybe endurance sport in general, is kind of intoxicating for that reason. Is like you see quick improvements, whereas when you say start a diet, it can be quite a while till you see significant improvements, which can mean that adherence is a lot harder because you don't have that positive feedback loop. So yeah, exercise is one of those things.
Definitely with nutrition, and that's probably, again, why we took the approach we did, which was linking nutrition very closely to the exercise, and then people can understand and see the links between performance. Firstly, the performance, because if you do a really hard session and you're very low carb, you're probably not going to perform as someone who is maybe taking on a little bit more carbs and pushing a little bit more numbers. And so you instantly see it. You may not lose weight instantly, but you see the performance benefit, and you start linking nutrition to what you're doing, and you're like a little bit of an aha moment. It's like, okay, cool, I can follow this. And then, then it just comes down to, following principles around, calorie deficits or surpluses, depending on which way you want to go. And as long as you start doing that, manipulating it, it's pretty good fun. We digress. So mitochondriacs. So we've established that exercise is the key thing to changing mitochondria. So if you want to be having better mitochondria, people, exercise, variety of exercise, weightlifting, endurance, high intensity, all is going to be positive on you. That's the insight. Like we said, it's always good to give recommendations. So there were some recommendations in this review paper, specifically around supplements. And everyone loves a good supplement talk, because supplements are very easy to swallow. As opposed to exercising, all you have to do is put your hand in your pocket to pay for them, and then put your hand in your mouth to swallow them. So it talked about a few. The first being MitoQ, mitochondria targeted CoQ10. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I guess so. There's when we think about mitochondria, they have these four complexes that effectively generate the hydrogen gradient, and then that powers the energy. It gets complicated, and I won't bore listeners.
Don't get too into the weeds on this. Let's give them some action. Let's give them some actionable takeaways, and just tell them about the supplement.
Long story short, ubiquinol or coenzyme Q10 targets one of these, or is a key cofactor in one of them working. So basically, for you to produce energy, you need this, and it's actually part of the challenge when people are taking statins and they get muscle pain, is because of this enzyme that gets blocked a little bit. So the point being, it can help with that muscle pain, and you'll often see it recommended for people who've got muscle pain when they're exercising and they're taking a statin. And so it is a key part of this mitochondrial function. So this is a specifically mitochondrial targeted one. Now, I don't have insight into what makes this specific to mitochondria. Like, I can't tell you I have any insight. We'll go in good faith and say for some reason it targets mitochondria more than it would otherwise do, and that's fine. And then sort of, I guess, it helps energy production and therefore helps mitochondrial function better, right? Because remember, we've got a number of things that can happen. Your mitochondria you can get more mitochondria, you can get better functioning mitochondria, or you can change how they're functioning, so to speak, right? So all those things. So yeah, I guess it would help the function of mitochondria more than the number of them, so to speak, per se.
Yeah, look, this particular where they talked about, I think it was 20 milligrams per day, and they were investigating 6 weeks of leg extension power in healthy middle-aged older individuals.
Yeah.
They didn't actually measure mitochondrial respiration
Nope.
or reactive oxygen stress. Sorry,
Species.
species,
Yep.
reactive oxygen species. They didn't measure that, but they said that it may help maybe with the ROS, but it won't necessarily change mitochondria, as you said, like won't change the numbers. So keep in mind, apparently doses higher than 20 milligrams a day can cause a lot of GI issues. So MitoQ, worth taking.
So the way I think about this is always I use a few lenses that I've written about in my Substack as well. One lens is like the risk of starting versus not starting, right? So like if you wait, what's the risk? The answer is like probably not much. There's no irreversible stuff, I think.
Do no harm.
Yeah, exactly. There's certainly a risk. Is there a risk of starting? Okay, there's some minor side effects, but I think if you're taking this and you don't need it, it's probably not a huge risk either. There's not a lot of downside here. It's not a particularly risky thing. But then you go, well, what's the cost? And that when I say cost, there's financial, of course. And I tell you now, this is not a cheap supplement. It's not like a multivitamin or a B vitamin where they're pretty cheap and it's like, it's low cost, like, we'll pee out any problems. Like, so it becomes the risk benefit, cost benefit starts to really plummet. But with this, it's, it can be expensive. And certainly there's an opportunity cost as well. Like, is there something you're not doing as a result of doing this? What else could you be doing in that time, etc.? So it's not a huge opportunity cost. I think it's a bit of a financial cost. There's not a lot of downside. So it starts to become about how people want to do this. And again, like the through line here that you've emphasized well is, let's not, this is icing on the cake. Let's not make a cake out of icing. So, like, you got to be exercising. It's not an excuse not to exercise. So this is in addition to exercise. And we'll always supplement research is always hard because it's always about who are you researching, how are you going to see a result, what's the goal here, and if you don't see a result, you're probably not getting published. So they've chosen an older population who probably got more dysfunctional mitochondria. They've shown some benefits to it. It's a bit of a maybe. Does this work in younger people? Does this work in people who are doing different exercise? Does it improve performance? Those are all different questions that aren't answered by this, but there's certainly some there's a little bit of smoke here, early smoke. Will there be fire? Do we see that later? Yeah, it's a bit early, but it's an interesting one to think about.
Yeah, my take on this is likelihood you're probably not exercising. Like in the scheme of things, are you exercising at the capacity that you probably could in terms of changing mitochondria? Probably not. Start with that. Save your money. If you are exercising the house down, this isn't going to magically, as you said, increase mitochondrial numbers. It may change mitochondrial output. So if you're not exercising, there's absolutely no point taking this because it's actually going to have an effect if you're exercising a hell of a lot. If you are exercising a hell of a lot and you feel like you're not recovering potentially, maybe if we're talking you're in the 25 to 30 hour type range, maybe a professional athlete, you're struggling with something and you're doing everything else right, would I maybe mention MitoQ at this point in time? That's probably my jaded opinion on it. I think potentially other supplements could be much better. As you said, the cost of other ones could be much better.
There's also, you can take more general ubiquinol or ubiquinone, which is an even cheaper version, a non-reduced version. There's also I would also urge people to be a bit weary of reactive oxygen species. This is often what we talk about, that, this is why we take antioxidants, is to limit these. You're always at risk of reactive oxygen species are not bad. It's about when they are and where they are, right? So you can, if you take high doses of antioxidants post-exercise, blunt adaptation, right? This is kind of what we're seeing with ice baths to some degree as well. So it's always about when and how much. So I'd be just a little bit weary of when you're reading a paper, if you see reactive oxygen species and blunting it, like the question is always, well, do we need that or where are we doing that?
Dampening maybe. Blunting, definitely not. It would be my take. So yeah,
look, that's fair.
So we'll park that one. Okay, the next one, which I have been sent so many messages, especially from execs, high level individuals, going urolithin A. Should I be taking this? So what is urolithin A?
Well, it's made by the gut bacteria as a result of digesting some polyphenols. Let's keep it high level and call
Yep.
it that. So
Polyphenols come from what type of foods? Just
generally colorful foods, right? So vegetables, fruit, etc. So
berries, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so coffee as well, the best kind of berry.
Yes.
So it's you have these polyphenols. The gut bacteria makes urolithin A, and again helps mitochondrial function. There's a number of ways it does it. It gets really technical in this paper in terms of the exact mechanisms, and I don't think it's important. There's some interesting stuff. You sent me a paper on urolithin A and some runners, which was cool because it's actually in an athletic population, and showed some benefits. Now, yeah, the benefits are pretty skeptical. I think it's hard. It's always hard to show because the outcome wasn't necessarily improved that much, and small numbers and all sorts of stuff. But I think there's some interesting stuff here. I'm tracking it because I think I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years we've got some good evidence behind this. But equally, you can never be surprised if you see negative results come out in 5 years either. So I think it's more promising, I would say.
This one is interesting. It does pique my interest. I think with regards to the study that I sent you, 42 male runners, very good runners, competitive runners.
VO2 max 66. So they
had
going
decent. So this is applicable to the high level guy. Now, is it applicable to someone lower? Maybe, but certainly in this case, it was competitive runners, high VO2. I think they were at 4-week altitude camp.
Yep, and high too, like
1,700 meters
plus,
to 2,200 meters up. It did not make them, they were already fast runners. It didn't make them faster. So let's just say that Euro A, if we're going to call it that, urolithin A, may not be a performance enhancer. However, what it did do is maybe make you bounce back faster.
Yep.
So this could be something interesting, and maybe it is having that impact on the mitochondria in terms of how it's reducing potentially inflammatory biomarkers. What they found with this was that RPE was lower, so rate of perceived exertion was lower. They were taking 1,000. Oh, sorry, I didn't say how much they were taking. They were taking 1,000 milligrams per day.
Yeah. For 4 weeks.
1,000 milligrams. Yes. For 4 weeks. They also had lower creatine kinase levels. Now, again, is that significant? Does it represent potentially a reduction in breakdown? Maybe.
That was so they did some downhill running to induce that as well.
Yep.
So they looked at that. They showed less of that. They also, it was a 3,000 meter time trial, which is also like in elite runners, you're not going to see much of movement in there. So it doesn't surprise me they didn't see a benefit.
They did show a higher if they did something longer.
Yeah, exactly. They did show a higher VO2 max though, which was interesting because then it says to me maybe you're trading off.
Within group, it was, I think, the VO2 max, wasn't it?
So they had a supplementation and a placebo, and then they split the group off again and did half of them did that, the VO2 maxes, and then half did the muscle biopsy for the creatine kinase. So it was this it was quite a convoluted study, and they had very small numbers in the end, but they did show some changes in VO2 max without a change in hemoglobin mass, but no change in performance. So I'm not convinced it's.
But it was only 4 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it was 4 weeks. Maybe it was too short. Maybe chronic supplementation. Like I think of something like beta-alanine. Like I'm actually all for chronic beta-alanine supplementation now with endurance athletes. I think especially older athletes, as you start to see drops in carnosine levels as well as we age, is there something there? Yeah, I think so. So I think chronic supplementation of a base level, like get your levels right up for beta-alanine, then you go on to a maintenance dose, and then maybe 4 to 6 weeks out from competition, go back up to your 6.8 grams. So I really like that. And I feel like this, maybe 1,000 milligrams wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just too short duration. Maybe this is where I think it is a supplement that potentially will gain attention, could be really useful. Maybe if you're training at altitude, maybe if you've got really a training camp, maybe you're going into competition. I don't know.
Also, if you live in a flat area, you go into the mountains for a bit. Maybe this is helpful in terms of preventing some of the pain and soreness from the muscle damage from the creatine
100%.
kinase. So I think there's some smoke here that's a bit more promising. Again, like we don't know. We'll see not cheap, certainly not cheap. So
Yeah, it
worthwhile
is. I
considering on
looked
that.
at it and I was like,
Yeah,
look,
yeah,
it's a bit like something like Plasmade. You're like, oh, and I did use Plasmade, and you would have covered Plasmade multiple times on the Norwegian method. Well, maybe you did on the Norwegian method and talked
yeah.
about it.
I mean,
No?
I like I know about how it's meant to work.
Yeah.
I think I've used one or two, but yeah, I haven't.
Good theoretical. It's
Yeah,
expensive. Would I take it all the time? No. Would I potentially take it before going into a race? Maybe. Interesting. All this stuff, it's interesting. And I think I'll certainly play around myself with URA and probably with athletes and then
yep,
get feedback. Can you look at certain markers, maybe performance metrics? RPE certainly is very easy to
yep,
quantify and collect. So I think watch that space. It's a good one. Inside
yeah,
recommendation. Yeah, watch the space. Maybe try it. Have a look. Okay,
yeah,
next one. Omega 3s, EPA, DHA
yeah. I
in
think
relation to mitochondrial function.
yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. Like you need these anyway. I don't think again you need good quality ones. Ideally get it from diet, eat enough oily fish, all those sort of things. Like those are the caveats. But I just don't think we should be shirking this. Like, if you look at our food system, and I don't want to be like a sort of fearmonger, but like the omega-3 content in our food system is going down. I do think we need enough of these. I think we need to balance our ratio of 3 to 6s. Sixes are not the end of the world, but we certainly need to balance that ratio. And so I think it's a bit of a no-brainer to be supplementing these if you can afford to do so and you can get good quality ones. Like I think that's kind of my take on this, and it's been that way for the last 10 plus years. Now, why they work, if it's mitochondria or anti-inflammatory effects, somewhere else or whatever, like fine. I'm pretty agnostic about it. I think there's enough data when it comes to health and performance as well. Because again, sometimes we're trading these off, right? Which is kind of where the pitch of my newsletter is exactly this: is like what's for health, what's for performance, and where do we see they agree and where they disagree. Omega 3s are kind of for everything all the time. So like I don't see a big reason not to worry about it.
Mate, if I had to say, I usually say, people say to me, what supplements should I take? And I'm like, well, I don't know you for anything, but come on, give me a recommendation. And it'd be like, okay, well, depending on your protein requirement, I'm probably going to recommend some form of protein supplement to complement your diet, whether it's plant or animal based. I'm going to say that. Creatine monohydrate, it's just no brainer. I'm going to tell you that. And the other one is going to be omega 3s. I'm
Yep.
like, it's just non negotiable in my world. It's like for
Yep.
health, I look, yes, there is some conflicting data and things like that, but I think overall, I think the research supports the use of omega 3s, brain, heart, overall health, reduction in non-communicable type diseases. I think it makes sense from a performance perspective. Some evidence to say maybe improvements in lean muscle mass, certain markers in inflammation reduced, and then in terms of mitochondrial function, maybe it does something. I'm like, is there any downside to taking omega 3s? Maybe if you take too many and, bleed out, but, unless you're on warfarin or something like that, then you're probably all right. So look, I'm a massive fan of omega 3s, and whether it has a direct impact on mitochondria, we don't know that yet. I'd take a gamble on it and tell yourself, placebo is very powerful. Tell yourself it's helping your mitochondria and you're probably going to do yourself a favor.
Yeah. Again, like when you've got a supplement that works on multiple areas and relative, and like again,
Perfect.
with low cost, low risk, low consequence, like it just doesn't strike me as something we should be concerned about how it works. In the exact opposite way of the last discussion we had, which is, hey, this seems to improve VO2 max, but maybe not performance. It's like, well, if this improves performance, we don't know how. Like maybe it's not that big a deal. So, it's kind of the opposite of that. So black box it and carry on.
Yep. NAD plus precursors. These ones are big actually in the longevity space, and certainly I remember when I was living in Boston, NMN was huge. NAD plus. Can you just give us a quick insight into what is NAD or NAD plus precursors, and why might they potentially have an impact on mitochondria?
Yeah, so it's all about hydrogen, and like hydrogen scavengers and acceptors basically is the way to think about this. As we age, our NAD goes down, therefore it can't become NAD plus, or say NADH, and therefore we end up taking more, or the theory is take more NAD so it can accept more hydrogen and you have less sort of reactive oxygen species is kind of the high level. I've not done the research on this, but everybody I respect and have talked to about it has said the same thing, which is we're just not seeing the movement by giving precursors. We give the precursors, and part of the problem is, depending on how you give them, they may or may not get to where they are intact. And so my take to this point, not having done my research, but having spoken to other people, is probably these are expensive and they are probably not having the effect we think, unfortunately, because we'd love that. I'm also not convinced that, again, we can't improve this without exercise, with just exercising and those sort of things. Like there's this thought that like, oh, you can fix one part of aging by fixing this, right? We give you precursors and it fixes aging because, it's this one thing. And I'm of the belief the body's a complex system. And so you kind of need to stop siloing bits of it and go like, oh, if we just fix NAD, then the mitochondria will function better. It's like, well, the mitochondria are a result of any number of signals we're sending them. So like, let's try and act more holistically than just like one sort of small pathway here. So that's kind of been my take to this point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And, there's massive buzz, and there still is buzz around these, but I'm sorry if you can hear a dog barking in the background. Nicotinamide riboside, exactly what you said. It increases the blood metabolites, NAD plus in the blood, doesn't do anything in the muscle. Nicotinamide mononucleotide, NMN, same thing, increases the blood, doesn't do anything in the muscle. And then nicotinic acid, exactly the same thing. It's all really cool in theory, increases serum levels, does nothing at the level in which we actually need it to do it. It's a bit like carnosine supplementation, isn't it? It's not, that's not the rate limiter, beta-alanine is.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's where understanding, I guess, like the physiology becomes super important, because you can look at all these things like the Krebs cycle and all that in terms of cellular respiration. And theoretically, a lot of these changes make sense, but then in the practical outcome, it actually makes no difference at all, and it's just a waste of money.
Yeah. So there's a dietitian called Tim Crow. He's a professor of dietetics, or he was anyway, out of Deakin. He taught me in my medical school training. He has a good blog called Thinking Nutrition, and he covered this on a Substack pretty well as well. So I'll share that with you guys to throw in the show notes about all this stuff. That was the last one I read. Sorry, that just popped into my head as we were talking there.
No, I love that. Yeah. That'd be great to read. I think anything around that, it always gets me thinking about how does all this fit together. And I think what you said there, like, comes back to exercise, people.
Yeah.
Can you actually change a lot of this just purely through exercise? And I think that's great. The other thing that they mentioned, the authors in this paper, as we come to an end here, is that they talked about the application to masters athletes. And I thought this was good. What was your take on this with regards to masters athletes and then mitochondria and exercise and supplementation?
Well, I just think it's, as we age, we need to be a little bit more like, there's no one that thinks that masters athletes should train like young people. Because, even every master athlete goes, I can't do what I did when I was young, right? I've got to do more stretching, or I have to do more warm up, or I have to do less intensity or do it less frequently. Like, so we all acknowledge there are changes, right? And so, and we can call that aging, just bucket it and say age-related changes. And we spoke earlier about, like, do you get old because you stop exercising? Do you stop exercising because you get old? And it's sort of a mitochondrial question as well of this. Do we see like impaired mitochondria because of changes in training, or vice versa? And I think it's probably both. There's an undeniable creep that age gets in, right? Like, father time is undefeated. Even if you're taking whacks of HGH and testosterone, like many people are, like, you will still have age-related changes. And so there is an aspect of, you need to do things differently if you're a little bit older. And I would be more focused on mitochondria, particularly if you're an endurance athlete and aging. I would certainly be there. And then I would be really worried about and focused on tendons if I was a strength or endurance athlete and I was aging, because these things just don't bounce back like they used to. So you've got to be smarter with how you load them or how you stimulate them, and then certainly smarter with how you feed them, right? The nutrients you feed them and the potential toxins you feed them as well, right? And I don't want to be fear-mongering, but there are certainly things you can do that are bad for mitochondria or bad for tendons, right? So let's not do those things. Let's do the things that help it. Let's feed them the right nutrients and let's load them properly. And that involves consistency for the most part, as opposed to big swings and stuff.
Yeah, consistency. And definitely both being, I'm a bit older than you, mate, but the tendon talk is real. I remember when we were talking about marathons and you were like, well, you just need to increase your volume, mate. And I was like, yeah, I know. But then my poor little Achilles and patella tendons start getting bloody sore and creaky, and, old rugby injuries start coming back to haunt me. So but it's all load management. It's consistency. It's build up slowly. Don't do things too fast. And hopefully, if you're patient, same thing with nutrition, just patience, follow a process. The outcomes look after themselves, but it's all habit formation, which is always easier said than done.
Well, I would say it's simple, not easy.
Yes. Simple. Well, yes. And simplicity is in the process or in the way in which you build that process. And if you keep it simple, then, hopefully the process looks after itself.
Yep.
Mate, we could talk forever, honestly. I'm sure we will do another episode on this. Do you want to just touch, last one?
Yep.
Infrared. Everyone wants to know about it. And look, I know we're just going to probably cover this in about a few minutes and people might be like, I really want to know about infrared. Just a quick sort of what did the paper say? Well, not this paper, actually. You sent me another paper which was titled, what was it titled? Near infrared. No, not that one. Sorry. Low intensity light therapy, exploring the role of redox mechanisms.
Yep.
I think it was the paper, and it was published in 2008. August in Photomed Laser Surgery, I think is the paper.
Yeah. I think this speaks to a little bit of like some stuff that happens sometimes in health and performance, certainly in longevity spaces and functional medicine and wellness, is that you'll sometimes have smart people who've seen stuff and been tracking it for a while or go back and dig things up. Like a 2008 paper, it's almost 20 years old.
Oh, no,
right? Like,
scary, isn't it?
So thinking about it like that, it's like, well, hang on, why aren't we talking about this more? I think some of it's to do with the accessibility, right? These near infrared spectrum, like basically infrared light or near infrared, these sort of red light therapy, all this stuff is much more accessible these days, right? We have commercial units on the market, and so that will drive part of the hype as well, right? And that's positive from it's certainly positive in some degree, and certainly has some more capitalistic origins as well, right? These companies will sponsor a podcast or people will be involved with the company, right? I don't want to, be short-sighted about it, but these things happen, right? My podcast is sponsored. Like, I don't want to, it's not all negative. It's the reality of it. So you end up with these reasons that we start hearing about it. And this is certainly part of it. And there's certainly some benefits here, to Huberman's credit, a lot of this research is in the eye, which is his area of specialty.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that I've always sort of been a little bit careful with Huberman is like when he gets out of his specialty, like all of us, he gets a little bit less good, right? But when it's the eye, the guy's like, he's up there, right? So this stuff, a lot of this has been done in the eye because there's, photoreceptors in the eye, but there's certainly some interesting stuff coming out looking at mitochondrial function and certainly how they are working. Again, it's not going to be about mass, it's going to be about how they're working based on red light exposure. Now, there's tons of, Huberman's talked a lot about the metabolic effects of red light into the eye and sort of circadian rhythm setting and that stuff. And I think there's some real important, importance of getting a circadian rhythm right. There was, the guys and girls at Whoop published a paper looking at some of their data on 4 behaviors and, improvements in all sorts of stuff. And one of them was circadian anchoring, which is just getting some light in your eyes in the morning. So I think Huberman's done a lot in that respect. And I think it's really, really good. I'm about to travel to it.
Is that changing the mitochondria in the eye? Is that what it's saying?
I think it's more to do with circadian rhythm and setting everything off. So you have these things called Zeitgebirs, which are basically signals to your body about what time of day it is. They're these sort of clocks in your body, and it's about resetting those. And so we have these in our gut. So when we're feeding, that sets our circadian rhythm to some degree. When we exercise based on normal habits, when we get light, blue light versus red light, all of the above. So all these things are signals to our body about, caffeine intake, all these things about when, what time of day it is, right? So I'm about to go to Australia. That's about a 12-hour time difference. It's not quite, but it's there or thereabouts. So how do I get on that time zone? Well, I send the signals to my body telling it it's on the new time zone, right? So we start early, we start before we leave, and then when we get there, we keep pushing harder and harder, right? So that's kind of part of the circadian anchoring is like ensuring that we're getting enough light on our skin and in our eyeballs, because one of the big clocks in our body is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is sort of behind the eye. It's part of the eye. So there's kind of that aspect of it. Then there's the red light aspect, and a lot of that is to do with, there's some eye health aspects to this. There's some skin health aspects to this. And then there's certainly some mitochondrial health aspects to it as well. So again, outside of the significant costs, which is the cost of a unit and the opportunity cost, because you have to sit in front of a red light, or gain red light therapy, right? Whatever it is, however you want to apply it. Aside from those things, I don't see a big downside to it. Hearing some dermatologists speak, there's not a lot of concern about red light. Of course, the dose makes the poison. Enough water will kill you. Enough oxygen will kill you. So be careful with this as always. But I think it's a relatively low consequence, low risk done properly. And then it's just about getting the right wavelengths. And there's research on this. You can link to the paper. They talk about different wavelengths for different things. And then making sure that the lights that you get have those wavelengths.
I was going to say, not all red light is red light, people.
Correct. So it's not a red light bulb.
Do a little bit of reading around the device that you're actually going to spend your money on, and not necessarily that the more expensive it is, the better it is, but there probably might be some relationship between the cost of the product you're buying and actually what it's producing. So definitely read the specs is what I would say about the wavelength, the intensity, energy density, that sort of thing, the pulse frequency. But it's one of those, maybe there's more to come. It's certainly a lot of people rave around red light and infrared. At the moment, infrared saunas are obviously the biggest thing since sliced bread and apparently cure all disease. So, I think there seems to be something there. It's just, what does it do, and is it better than exercising? Oof.
Well, the answer is no. But there is nothing's better than exercise. I'm of that opinion, but that's why I've done most of my life has been lived the way it has. But there's also a component of thinking about where you live with respect to light, right? I've moved from Australia to the UK. Sure. My light exposure is completely different. And, I would probably be well served doing more red light exposure here. In Australia, it's there's so much light about. You can probably get a good amount of red light if you're outside during sort of sunrise, sunset. Do you need it? Those sort of things. So I'm less convinced in sunnier places. But certainly, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and the further north you are, especially in winter, there's a good going reason to be doing this. So, that will change the benefit, not necessarily the cost, but certainly change the benefit. And therefore, the return on investment is probably better as well. So, worthwhile considering those aspects too.
Yeah, no, definitely. All very valid points. Mates, thank you so much. Very entertaining. Very much enjoyed it. I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions from this and a lot of feedback, and definitely happy to have you back on. I'll keep an eye on. Anytime. As I said, we will plug your Nexus Health Performance newsletter. We'll put the references in for the papers that we did talk about today. And if people have questions, they can always reach out to us. But Dave,
happy if they want to reach out to me as well. I'll send you some links for things in your show notes as well.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll obviously we'll publish this on Apple and Spotify, and we'll do some social media posts with some snippets. So lots to come. But mate, thank you once again. I know you're about to start your day. I'm finishing my day, so enjoy sunny London.
Yeah, always. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And anytime you want me back, let me know.